If we know all of this, and we are motivated to fix this broken system, you use the word broken, so I'm going to turn to you. The ideal training for criminal and justice and law enforcement professionals so that we recognize the problem and get these folks help. First, are they getting the right training? And if not, what should be that training?
Some law enforcement agencies are getting the right training. There's a model law enforcement training called crisis intervention training. It was developed in Memphis in the late 80s. At the crux of it is about collaboration between law enforcement, mental health agencies, and the community, because it really takes the establishment of an ecosystem to really build up the supports around individuals.
I'm not going to
go
to
It's a 40-hour training.
Let's not go there.
It does. It really does, though. I mean, we talked about how many families have disengaged and how, we bounce people from the criminal justice system to the community. So it really does take a village to really wrap our arms around individuals and develop this comprehensive model of care. But the crisis intervention training, CIT training, teaches law enforcement all about mental illness, the different types of mental illness, where to take individuals, and they work hand in hand with the mental health community so that they can drop them off at one of those centers in the community to have an assessment, and the law enforcement can then get back to their job.
And let me follow up on
Go
that.
ahead.
Actually, in the May issue last year of the American Journal of Psychiatry, we published a paper, and it was a collaboration between the University of New Mexico Department of Psychiatry and the Albuquerque Police Department. And there was the take-home message was very, very clear. The only way to solve this problem is to work together, meaning in this case, the Department of Psychiatry and APD, Albuquerque Police Department, and it's in different ways. One of these is training, but another one is communication. So every time that the officers bring a patient to the psychiatric emergency services to us, it's an opportunity for training, to talk. And actually, many times the best information that we get about how the patient is doing is through the officers, that the information that they provide to us. So it is an ongoing collaboration. That is the way to do it.
And let me give you an example of how successful it can be. We have the largest trained squad of CIT officers in the United States. I have over 6,000 police officers in my community trained. All 36 departments are trained. And between, over the last 8 years, the two largest agencies handled 83,427 mental health CIT calls. They only made 149 arrests. The arrests in Dade County as a result of these programs went from 118,000 arrests a year to 56,000. We closed a jail, which was an actual savings of $12 million a year. It's been closed for 6 years. $72 million of real savings into my county. People didn't get shot, they didn't get hurt, police officers didn't get hurt, and the jail audit was cut in half. So these programs work, but it's not just enough training police officers. You also have to train the entire legal system. There's politics involved in this.
Really? There's politics
involved? Can you imagine? Go figure.
I'm shocked. Shocked.
Prosecutors are elected, and they understandably worry about, protecting public safety, and there's a lot of misinformation, and they think we have to lock up all these people. And what they don't understand is these people that they're so concerned about, 98% of them are going to get released. And so the choice is, do we release them with or without treatment? And if we're going to release people, they need to be released with a nice, seamless system of care.
That's the important part, is when you're not arresting them, where are these people going? And
I was
providing the treatment, because the primary prevention is really keeping them out of the interaction with the law enforcement. And when we see every state has been only closing state programs for patients that often don't have better means of treatment, and we see the correctional facilities are our largest by far inpatient facilities for psychiatric programs, we're certainly going still in the wrong direction.
Well, that's the great irony here. Because it's not an entitlement to get care in the community, and it is inside the correctional, as we've seen this massive increase over the last 10 years of growth in the correctional system with people with mental illnesses, what the states are doing is they're taking the money from the community mental health system to fund the correctional mental health system. And they're making access more difficult in the system and pushing more people into my system.
To my previous point, patients get treatment in the correctional system, they're discharged, and treatment stops. They get hospitalized.
In my untutored way of looking at this, I go back to that decision to say that you can't involuntarily commit people just because they look crazy on the street. So the total number of folks hasn't changed as a percentage of the community.
Correct.
So if you squeeze down on this side, that side's going up.
That's right. You're just squeezing one into the other.
In
I think that's
almost-
right. 100%.
Wow.
In almost every
And
state
much more expensively
in
and much
this
more
country,
cruelly.
the largest mental health institution is a correctional facility.
By about 5 to 10.
But the problem is not having not correct commitment laws. Much of the problem is not having treatment facilities to treat them.
Whether it's in the correctional facility or not treating people should not be an option.
Because frankly, the first thing you want to try to do anyway, and if you do it right, most people will voluntarily take treatment. Okay, you need to reserve those laws for people that are just incredibly resistant to that treatment system. But most people are not. The problem is, as the doctor pointed out, we don't have adequate systems of care in the community, and they're not funded appropriately. They're not always using the best evidence-based practices, the right medications, or even getting the correct diagnosis. And so people end up as a default into our system.
We come back to politics. I want to move on, but I want to put this stereotype out there so somebody can probably knock it down. If you take a look at television, which is where a lot of folks seem to get their impressions of the mentally ill, the classic picture is there's a mentally ill person threatening a police officer with a weapon. And the police officer is faced with a second-by-second decision. Violence ensues, often not very good for the mentally ill person. And that scenario is deeply embedded in American culture. And you're telling me that's just wrong.
Well, it is wrong, but what usually happens is if the officer isn't trained, they inadvertently escalate the situation where deadly force becomes necessary. It's everything that happens beforehand. And so if you have someone who's paranoid by definition, sometimes they're having what we call these ideations where the government's out to get them. A law enforcement officer shows up in a uniform, so they're playing into their paranoia. And then they'll say and do things that will actually make the person maybe go after them in a way they wouldn't if the officer had approached them inadvertently.
Actually, there's a term that did not exist, or at least I did not hear it 10 years ago, which is suicide by cop. You didn't hear that before. Now you have individuals who are suicidal, and one of the methods they use is to put themselves in a situation that they could be shot. Wow. I'm sure this is a big challenge for the officers, and it is real.
You know, there's another part of this. None of us are immune from these illnesses, and we know that trauma is a major contributor to these serious mental illnesses. And there was a fascinating study just this last year that law enforcement officers get 6 to 9 times more cortisol a day than non-law enforcement. And
endogenous cortisol.
Yes.
Their bodies are manufacturing.
Correct, because they're in stressful situations. And so we get, in Miami, about 150 officers a month call my coordinator for their own personal mental health issues.
Really?
Yes, it's a huge problem. It explains why last year more police officers died from suicide than in the line of duty. They have some of the highest suicide rates, domestic violence rates, substance use rates, and divorce rates because of all the trauma that they face. And so we need to be treating the whole system. And that also, I believe, contributes to some of the shootings out in the community because the officer's already stressed and they're now in a stressful situation and they may be overacting to the situation.